Imagine yourself looking out at the vast sea before you. You reach down and you put a hand into the water and you scoop it up towards you. Immediately the water starts leaking through your fingers until the hand is empty. That water is a man's life. From birth to death, it is always slipping through our hands until it is gone, along with all that you hold dear in this world.
Hey guys, I'm Luke. The world is a really weird place. So many people are lost, but fortunately, a lot of people are at least working that out. And I'm here to take the gloves off and explore the question, what's the point anyway? I went through my own deep exploration on this question over the past 5 years, and after 30 years of atheism, I became a Christian. I'm not really a typical Christian or churchgoer. In fact, I really struggle with much of what modern Christianity projects itself to the wider world. And I'd actually disagree with more Christians than I agree on with what the point is anyway. So what I want to do with this podcast is bring on guests with all different worldviews and put their perspectives in the furnace of ideas and really challenge them to find out which ones make the most sense. I believe that the truth is knowable, and through vigorous debate and questioning, we can uncover it. Join me as I stress test all these ideas and try to answer the question of what the point is anyway.
Welcome back to What's the Point Anyway? Joining me today is someone who on paper may seem to be my complete opposite, and yet I am as interested and excited about this discussion as I have been with any other guest. Stephen Long is a writer, yoga teacher, and podcaster from North Carolina. Having grown up in the church, he was a Christian missionary, but as he came out as a homosexual, he was cut off and in 2017 joined the Church of Satan, where he served as a minister. He left the Church of Satan at the beginning of this year, and via his podcast series, Sacred Tension, he's currently asking questions about spirituality and where that leads him next. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me. I've been fascinated to listen and read much of your content due to the total range of emotions it evokes in me. I disagree, I agree, I'm frustrated, and I sympathize all within a matter of minutes. So let's hash it out.
That's good to hear. I'm afraid that from the very beginning, I have to offer a correction. I was actually a member of the Satanic Temple and not the Church of Satan.
Right.
Two very different organizations. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I think we'll talk about the Church of Satan and the Satanic Temple at some point in this discussion. But I thought maybe a good point to start was when I reached out a month ago or so, I thought I was reaching out to a minister in that Satanic Temple. And then I learned that you've recently left, which I think makes you even sort of more interesting than when I first reached out. But I guess that tells me that you're still on a journey of trying to work out what's the point anyway. So how would you answer the question off the bat?
Where where I am spiritually, religiously?
Yeah. And I guess, yeah. So, I mean, title of this show, what's the point anyway, is the ultimate question, like, why are we here?
Okay.
What not an easy question, but what do you think is the answer?
Yeah, so I am in a point where I am very deliberately resisting the urge, the impulse to tie myself to any particular religious group right now. Because this is really the first time that I'm a nun, an N-O-N-E, and unaffiliated, and first time in my life. So I converted right out of Christianity into Satanism in 2017, and then I was in TST, the Satanic Temple, for 6 years. And I left TST. I'm still technically a member. I'm still very friendly with a lot of people in TST, but have expanded beyond it. And I don't call myself an ex-Satanist, and that's really important. So I don't consider myself an ex-Satanist, nor do I consider myself an ex-Christian. I consider myself a post-Satanist and a post-Christian, which is it's slightly different. It isn't a rejection of it. It's kind of an expansion beyond it, an inclusion of the best parts of it, ecumenical graciousness towards it, also saying this is not who and where I am right now, but this is an integral part of my past. This is part of my story, and I'm going to embrace that. Yeah, I don't consider myself an ex-Christian, so or an ex-Satanist, and I think that so funny when I announced that I no longer considered myself a Satanist. All of these Christians flocked into my DMs. I think partly because being a Satanist was a bit too scary, but post-Satanist is more, ex-Satanist is more interesting. But also, I think a lot of people assumed that I was an ex-Satanist. And I really push back on that. I still love quite a bit of Satanism, but also I think that there are some profound pitfalls. I think that there are some serious drawbacks. And we can talk about all that. So where I am now, I'm very informed by Buddhism. I'm very much a humanist. I am very informed by my Christian upbringing as well. I think one could easily say that I am a cultural Christian in terms of my ethics, in terms of what I value. And I also still have a satanic streak in me as well.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like, how do you describe something? How do you describe yourself in the singular religious word or identity when you have been raised in a pluralistic culture?
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's really difficult to do that. It's like, am I a Buddhist? Am I a humanist? Am I a Stoic? Am I a Christian? Am I a Satanist? Like, yes. And that, but I am actively resisting the impulse to identify with any particular tradition right now and just kind of experience the tension, experience this new
sacred tension.
Yes, exactly. Experience this new landscape that I'm in of not being bound to any particular religion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've listened to lots of your, read lots of your writings, listened to lots of your podcasts. And I think from my perspective, it seems like you're clearly a really deep thinker and a super sort of cerebral guy. And you're trying to answer these questions and blend everything together from a philosophical point of view, which I think is fine and is good. Have you got an opinion on, like, I mean, this is a sort of simple way of asking the question, and I think it's deeper than that. But, like, where did we come from and why are we here? Because I think that takes it away from the philosophical and into the truth. Like, I mean, are we here because there was a creator and he's a knowable creator, or is it all randomness and all we're doing is coming up with philosophical answers to questions that can't be known?
Truly agnostic on that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I have often called myself an atheist, but I'm discovering that that's a very misunderstood term in the way I use the word.
100%.
Because I think of atheism as a spectrum, and so on one end you have hard atheism, and those are people who affirmatively believe that God does not exist. But then on the other side you have soft atheism, and those are the people who are could be described as agnostic atheists, the people who are like, for whom not knowing if there is a God equivalent to not believing in God, but it isn't an affirmative conviction that there is no God. Subtle difference, right? There's a big difference. One is
massive
kind of
difference.
There's an open-handed wonder and an open-handedness, but I'm just withholding belief.
Yeah.
Because I don't have sufficient evidence. So there are a lot of things I don't have sufficient evidence for, but that I'm extremely radically open to. I actually consider myself kind of, just extremely epistemically open to a lot of things. So I've been opting more for the word non-theist because I find that it has a softer connotation than the word atheist. But I am truly agnostic on that. And, I recently wrote an article called A Field Guide to the Divine, where I explored a lot of the different things that people mean when they talk about God. I came up with 7 different ideas, 7 different usages of the word God that people might use when they say the word God. there is one particular quote. Let me pull this up on my phone real fast. Please hold. This is where you can insert the please hold music. While I was researching for that article, I stumbled across this quote by Einstein, and I really agree with it. Oops, that's not it. It's like, that is the encapsulation of where I am. That is the description of what I believe. Yes, go on.
As I'll just I'll buy you a minute or so as you're searching for this quote. I think, for the listeners listening to this, I think you've just touched on a really important point, that there is a different, I think a lot of people wouldn't know the difference between atheist and agnostic and theist and then actual believer in Christ or believer in some other version of God. And I mean, God is an English translation. It's not, the God of the Hebrew Old Testament is by the name of Yahweh, and other religions have their God. God is just an English word to describe creator, the divine, or whatever one wants to call it.
Absolutely.
Agnostic, so I lived for like 33 years as a probably an atheist, but I just considered the idea of a divine creator as ridiculousness. So I didn't even care for it. I wouldn't have cared less about having a debate about it. I thought the idea of debating the existence of God was just stupid. I just didn't believe in it because I'd never sort of looked into it. But I think agnostic is where, then you have sort of some prominent atheists now that debate in favor of there being no God. There is absolutely no God. It's all sort of randomness. But agnostic is different to that, where it's like, yes, there may be or there may not be, but I don't know.
Absolutely. And Gnosticism has to do with what we know. Theism and atheism has to do with what we believe. And belief and knowledge are actually different categories.
Yeah.
It sounds counterintuitive to say that belief and knowledge are counterintuitive, but we separate them all the time, and they are different experiences. And so I hear Christians all the time say, well, I know that Christ was raised from the dead. No, I don't, but I choose to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I actively believe it, even though I don't know. They are an agnostic Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone can be an agnostic atheist. Someone can say, I don't know, but I'm going to withhold belief. And so I personally think that it's a sensible approach to bring knowledge, one's belief into alignment with each other.
Yeah.
That tends to work pretty well for me. And to just say, if I don't know if something is true, then I'm not going to say I believe it is true.
Yeah.
But
did you find your quote?
I did. Okay, so when it comes to what do I believe about the big picture, what's the name of your show again?
What's the point anyway?
Hey, what's the point anyway? Okay, this is my answer to that. This is Einstein.
Yeah.
Human mind, no matter how highly trained, cannot grasp the universe. They are in the position of a little child entering a huge library whose walls are covered to the ceiling with books in many different tongues. The child knows that someone must have written those books, does not know who or how, does not understand the languages in which they are written. The child notes a definite plan in the arrangement of the books, a mysterious order, which it does not comprehend, but only dimly suspects. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of the human mind, even the greatest and most cultured, toward God. See a universe marvelously arranged, obeying certain laws, and we understand the laws only dimly. Our limited minds cannot grasp the mysterious force that sways the constellations. So, I think that the correct response to the universe is awe. I mean awe in the full religious connotation of that word, just the magisterial kind of mind-shattering, beautiful awe. And in many ways, I see the universe as a sort of Zen koan, a Zen koan being, the Zen sayings that are contradictory, that are innately contradictory, that monk will meditate upon to attain enlightenment. And so what is the sound of one hand clapping is one of my favorites is you're standing on a bridge, the bridge is standing on a bridge over the river, the bridge is flowing and the river is still. And you just meditate on it, right? And I think that the universe is akin to a koan that is unknowable, but in examining it, in the study of it, in the contemplation of it, in a contemplative practice, there's real beauty and kind of sublime mystery to be cracked open there. That's my approach. Now, whether there is a God or not, I think that's just above my pay grade. I think it's highly unlikely that God would be the gods of the world religions. I think it's pretty unlikely that it would be the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Muslim God or the Hindu God or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think that whatever is at the root of all things, whatever that ground of being is, whatever God is in the Paul Tillichian sense. Okay, and here's the thing. I am okay with the word God. And I go into this in my article. There are many different ways of talking about God. I talk about the philosopher's God, which is God as the ground of being, God as first mover, God as, a lot of those Thomist definitions of God. It's the philosopher's God, and a lot of that is, or classical theism. A lot of that stuff is really, really interesting, and I'm not entirely opposed to it. But a lot of that is a very little resemblance to what I call the confessor's God, which is the God creeds of the Nicene apostles, of the specific historical claims of world religions, and those I am far more skeptical of. So, in a way, am I a theist? Am I a non-theist? I honestly don't know. I've just erred saying that I'm an atheist, but I think a lot of people, when they drill down, they're like, I don't know, are you? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? So, I mean, I obviously disagree with your current answer, but then at the same time, the answer you just gave is infinitely more sophisticated than an answer I would have given 5 years ago. Someone would have asked me a question, drilled me with a few follow-up questions, and I actually would have had zero response. So what a Christian apologist, Philip Morrow, wrote a book, and I thought the point he made was really profound, is that basically through all of world history, most people have believed in a divine creator, whatever form that was. The idea of atheism is reasonably modern. That there was no reason for this creation. So because the true question is not whether there is some form of creator or not. The true question is whether that creator has revealed himself to us in a knowable way. And so I'm interested in you as a guy who sort of grew up in the church and obviously had a pretty tumultuous end to that. And I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. But, you talk about the Bible often, and you're still sort of reading the Bible and talking about the man Jesus and certain parts of his teachings. Why do you not think, and you've obviously chosen not to believe that is the true revelation from God, why have you come to that conclusion?
Jesus is not God.
Yeah.
So I think that there is the most fundamentally true answer. Then I will give you all the post hoc rationalizations, which I think are true, but they're still post hoc, which is I don't believe that belief and unbelief are a choice. I think doubt and belief emerge from a substrate deeper conscious thought and deeper than rationality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And So the truth is that I found myself predisposed to find belief in Christ impossible, and that to force myself to believe in Christ would be deceptive. It would be dishonest. It would be, and I ultimately decided that it was better to be a dishonest heathen than an honest Christian. Is a tectonic plate shift that happened gradually over the course of years deep beneath the surface, right? And, we can provide all of these post hoc explanations of why that thing happened. But the truth is, I think people choose to believe. I think that, if Hebrews calls faith a gift, and I think that's actually right. I think that's actually correct. It is a gift. I think it's a gift of the mind. I think it comes from within, but same with doubt. These are gifts. We don't choose them. Okay, that said, I eventually got to the point where I didn't understand why saying I don't know was not preferable. I think that the tomb probably was empty.
Yeah.
What the hell happened there?
Yeah. So you believe he was
He was a real
undoubtedly
person.
a person.
Yeah,
he was a real
totally.
Yeah.
No, we
yeah.
have
which
have
I think
more
is more or less undisputed.
Oh yeah, no, we have more evidence of him than we do of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the most documented people in ancient history.
Yeah.
The ancient world. So no, he absolutely existed.
I often say there's more evidence of his life than there is of mine.
Absolutely.
And you can speak.
I mean, in terms of the literature, yes, absolutely. I don't know. I've been pretty prolific on the internet though, so we'll see. But yes, he is one of the most documented people of the ancient world. I don't know what happened. A mystery is a mystery, and I'm okay with a mystery being a mystery. It happened to the empty tomb. If I know. Oh, sorry. Can I swear on your show?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, sorry.
You're not the first guest to let out the F word. That's okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that is not preferable. Because here's the thing. There's a gauntlet that miracles have to go through in order for me to be convinced that it happened. The first gauntlet is establish that a miracle actually happened. Right? And this is really harder to do than we think because human beings are confabulators. Now, doesn't mean liars. We do confabulate. Memory is one of the least reliable. It is extremely unreliable. And I'm actually open to extraordinary things happening and fascinated by miraculous stories, by the paranormal. I'm fascinated by all of that stuff, and I love it. It's just establishing that it actually happened is quite hard, and don't understand why saying I don't know is not preferable to filling in the gap, to use Dawkins' phrase. I don't understand why it isn't preferable to just say I don't know.
Yeah.
And here's the real hang up that I have is, let's say something extraordinary is established as true. Okay, let's use a modern example. Let's say it is confirmed that candle flies off of my desk without me touching it. Now, all we have, and we have multiple, we record it, we catch it right here on Riverside. It's documented. I'm a witness. You're a witness. Partner in the other room is a witness, and then maybe we could redo it under, more, we could repeat it under more stringent circumstances, and boom, it happens again. Okay. What we have is simply example of a mystery. We don't know is why it happened. And very often what happens is a narrative, usually informed by culture at the time, whoops in to fill the mystery. So people see strange things in the sky. Now we say it's UFOs. We say it's aliens. When people in the past have seen strange things in the sky, they say it's a Marian apparition. It's a whatever, right? So we say Christ did, in fact, rise from the dead. Don't actually know why, because the narrative that has been built up around it rushed in to tell us what. And so in many ways, I don't understand why saying I don't know isn't preferable. And instead, I'm just content to say a mystery is a mystery. For me, it is not yet established that Christ was raised from the dead. I don't know what happened to the body in the tomb. Really don't. And there's much that is unexplainable about the history of Christianity. I think I will give Christianity this. I will say this. I think that Christianity is a revolution in ethics, in how we understand the human condition. Idea of a crucifixion victim, which is the most humiliating death, being resurrected as a god. That was something that was only preserved for Roman heroes. That was a bit, Roman heroes, the most beautiful, the most powerful, the most mighty. But the idea that the least of these become king, with it, the first will become last and the last will be first. I mean, that is a almost supernatural inversion of the order of civilization, and we are all beneficiaries of that. Why did that happen? I don't know. I'm still again content to just say I don't know. So I really, when it comes down to it, I don't understand why saying I don't know is not preferable to recite to.
No, I think that's fair enough. Funnily enough, I disagree with basically all of the creeds as well, which puts me in the heretic category. So
I love a good Christian heretic.
So I mean, I've got no issue with the creeds, and I think sort of the Constantine version of Christianity that has existed in the world from sort of 300 AD up until today is actually a gross perversion of what.
So you're an early church bro. Are you a house church kind of guy?
Well, I drift in and out. I don't pay too much attention to what we call the church fathers. I think they were the and this is not judging them or criticizing them, but the writings that we have of the church fathers are the writings that the prominent members of society decided to preserve for today. I think there were probably some really interesting early writers of people within the church that we don't have today because they were probably outlawed from the orthodoxy of the time. So for me, I think of the church fathers as Paul, Peter, James, and the rest of the apostles. I'm far more interested in what they had to say than what the early sort of Latin and Greek guys who lived in the 2nd and 3rd century do. But and also tying into what you said earlier, I sort of lean towards, you said faith is not a choice, and I sort of agree, and I think that was the story for my journey as well. The Bible says that God was the author and finisher of our faith, that therefore we didn't really create our own faith ourselves. So from that regard, with you or any other guests or others I speak to, I don't think it's my role to sort of proselytize and convince you that what I'm saying is right, that you need to believe. I think that we go on our own journeys and they take some crazy paths, and I'm not going to judge anyone else's journey because mine's probably worse worse than anyone's. But so when I push back a little bit on some of these, it's not me trying to convince you that my position's right and that yours is wrong, but I do think your answer is far greater than most people's answer because you don't know, but you actually have an opinion on it. Whereas I probably would have said, and most people would say, oh, no, I don't think he even lived. I think Jesus was a myth. And you're like, yeah, but most atheists and Jews and non-believers would all agree that he did exist.
You a creationist, by the way?
No.
Then I'll say this. I think
Yeah.
that the mythicist version is the atheist version of creationism
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
So here's my. So I think so. I mean, I'm a full preterist. So I believe that all eschatology in the Bible has been fulfilled and was fulfilled in 70 AD. And I think of all of the end times events that speak of were the end of Old Covenant Israel. And the Old Covenant was there, and what the end times created was the New Covenant kingdom, which would be a kingdom without end, which would be a spiritual kingdom, which would come, as Jesus said, without observation. The kingdom of God is within you. And that actually God's plan from the beginning of time was not to set up a kingdom with a king on the throne and priests ruling and an afterlife where people die and go to, but actually to dwell with man here on earth so that we could exist for the healing of nations and we could be God's representatives here on earth. So that leads to all different sorts of implications.
What do you think of the idea that the coming of Christ is the body of the church, the body of Christ in the fullness, living in the fullness of God's plan for the church?
Sorry, continue.
What do you think of that idea?
I think it's closer to the truth. I don't. That's not what I would say it is. Basically, what I think happened is, I think Jesus was the second Exodus. So the first Exodus, you had the children of Israel in bondage and slavery with the Egyptians for 400 years. Then Moses came, gave them the law, led them out of slavery through a series of miracles. And then they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before they could actually enter into the promised land. I think Jesus came after 400 years of not hearing from a prophet. He came to a corrupt and wicked generation that were ruling over the people and were basically keeping them in religious bondage. He came to deliver a new and better covenant. And for 40 years, which is the period basically from 30 AD to 70 AD, the early church was created, and 40 years later, Jesus returned as he said he would return to basically destroy Jerusalem as it was destroyed and establish the fullness of the new covenant kingdom where God would dwell within each of his people for all of eternity from there on.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard this perspective, but I don't think I've actually met someone who believes it. So this is awesome.
Yeah,
Because I spent most of my time in the Anglican Catholic, so I was raised kind of charismatic Presbyterian, which is a very bizarre combination. We can talk more about that. My father was an exorcist. He's an international ministry, so my childhood was absolutely bonkers. And and then I started to convert to Catholicism, decided not to at the last minute, and then kind of found myself in Episcopalian Anglican land. And then I fully deconverted.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, I mean, as you know, so much of the church is so focused on the end times and the end of the world where everything's going to be burnt up and Christ will come again to judge the living and the dead. I'm sorry, but I just don't see that in the scriptures. I think it speaks of an imminent coming where Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass till all these things happen. I mean, a biblical generation's 40 years, over and over it's 40 years. So he did come, he established that kingdom, and everyone is here waiting for this like end of the world, and actually creates some really poor behavior in Christians. So I believe
I agree with that. I think the apocalypse is the anticipation of the apocalypse has done enormous damage. Yeah.
And I mean, you would hear it with your lifestyle choices and the way that you live, that you're destined to burn in hell for all of eternity. I'm sure you don't
Oh,
believe
yes.
that.
All the time.
Um,
I get it on a regular basis. Yep.
But I mean, I don't believe it either. Hell is an English word that's a translation of Gehenna, which was sort of the graveyard outside of Jerusalem. And the other word that's translated is Hades, which was the realm of the dead. And
You a universalist or some
no, I'm not a
variety?
universe.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm a I guess an annihilationist.
Annihilationist. Okay, got it.
But essentially the way I see it, so I think Genesis is telling the story of a covenant creation. I don't think Adam was the first human to ever live. I think Adam was a man that God brought into covenant with him, and he brought them out of the world, which was, the form was void. And I think that's basically covenant language. It's all throughout the Bible. It's talking about the darkness. So I think man is dead apart from God. And that's not, I mean, I could probably say that to you, and I don't think you're going to take it as a criticism, that I think we all are dead apart from God. And that's that sort of hole in our hearts that we're missing. And then Jesus he was the light of the world. So he was the one that came to give us eternal life. So I think, I don't know all the answers. I continue studying. I'm trying to work my way out of it. But I think the hell that the New Testament talks of is basically the fire that would come on Jerusalem. So those that were following that old covenant system of trying to be righteous through their own works and keeping the law, Jesus came to say, hey, this is finishing, and follow the new covenant. Believe in me. I'll show you the way, which is what happened all throughout the book of Acts. They were preaching the way. He then came along, and those that didn't follow and wanted to keep up with the old covenant, their hell came upon them. That it was burnt up, and it has not existed to this day. So I think what that means for a human alive today is, I think we're all dead. Spiritually, we are apart from God. We don't know God. Jesus comes and he dwells in us, and that is him giving us life and bringing us to eternal life. I think when we die, we continue to be with him. What that looks like, I don't know. And when the unbeliever dies, they just die.
Fair enough.
I think they never knew God, and they die not knowing God, and that's it. I don't think there's a pit of fiery, eternal, conscious torment. I don't think that's what the scriptures teach, and I don't think that's in line with the character of God that we learn either.
I'm an annihilationist too, but for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't know. So if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would have been far more just staunchly materialistic.
Yeah.
That consciousness ends at death. And, I think that there's a lot of good reasons to think that that might be the case.
Mm-hmm.
However, now agnostic.
Yeah.
Philosophical materialism and whether consciousness confined to the brain.
Yeah.
Now agnostic on that, and I'm now actually more open than I used to be to theories like panpsychism, whatnot, because of the experiences that I've had in meditation. So I'm a regular meditator. Meditate every morning. I'm very inspired by Dzogchen, which is a Tibetan tradition, and various non-dual approaches to consciousness. And the experiences of consciousness that I have had, consciousness as this vast expansiveness.
Yeah.
Boundless expansiveness, contentlessness, identitylessness, which I am just a tiny little manifestation of. That's what the first person experience that I have had. Now, I try very hard to practice some restraint when it comes to first person phenomenological experiences, mystical experiences like that, because I've also, I'm one of those people who's prone to have just a ton of mystical experiences. My brain is wired for it. I'm diagnosed with bipolar 2. Like, I look at a sunset and I have a fucking mystical experience. So, I I try to practice a lot of restraint when it comes to metaphysics of mystical experiences, right? But the
Yeah.
force of the experience is so overwhelming that I compromise by landing in an agnostic middle and saying, I don't know, I will be open to, very much kind of how you hear people talk after they've had a kind of like a bonkers psychedelic trip, where it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know if machine elves are real, but I'm now agnostic on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I find really interesting and a topic I'm trying to navigate how I dig into it more is that I think a lot of people have thrown the idea of Jesus out because of how poorly most of the modern and the Orthodox Church portrays it. I think this idea that I go to a church at the moment. I like the guys there. That I think the fellowship is good. I disagree with a lot of the preaching because you go to most
What kind of
churches and
tradition or what kind of church is it, if you don't mind me
like
asking?
Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of like I like the reverence of it. I hate the modern, like the Pentecostal style that you go and there's people bawling their eyes out and speaking in tongues and doing which you'd be super familiar with.
I'm
So
extremely familiar.
I like Presbyterian from that regard. I go to church and the message is just over and over. It's like that we're waiting on something, that Jesus, we have to believe, and it's a carrot and stick, right? I mean, hell is such a they use the tool of hell over and over. That you got to believe, or you're going to go to hell. We all deserve to go to hell, and when you die, you go to heaven. I'm like, it just for me that sells short what Jesus came to tell us. That actually, the kingdom of God is here. It's accessible. We can access God, and in that way, the person that sort of studies the occult and studies meditation and these things, I think actually gets the nature of the kingdom better than most Christians do. Now, I don't side with them because I think they're missing the key to that, which is Jesus Christ. But the nature of it that you've described, I think, is far more real than the nature of we live on a wicked earth and the worth's going to get burnt up at some point in time, and then we're going to go to a heaven with golden streets and magical angels playing harps. I don't think that's what the Bible teaches
for sure.
us. So, in many ways, I can have a far greater conversation with you about what I think the scriptures are teaching than most Christians who have their whole hopes on this future heavenly kingdom that they're going to go to when they're going to escape out of this earth. But actually, our role is to be on this earth and to spread love and to love God and love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and we're missing the opportunity to do that, sadly.
Yeah,
So
no, I would agree with that. Yeah,
I'd love to segue that into your experience. Firstly, I want to ask, I think I know the answer to this, but I think it'd be interesting from the guests to hear it. Do you think you were born gay? And then if you were, how did that manifest into you growing up with an international church minister father being in the church your whole life?
so whether someone is born gay is a more complicated question than I think a lot of people would like to admit. Still don't entirely know why people are gay. What we do know is that okay, so the research that I am familiar with, I really dug into this topic for years up until about a decade ago. So there might be more work that's come out since then, but that I'm not familiar with. But it's a more complex question than a lot of people would think. So there's the Lady Gaga position, which is I was born this way, baby, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's the Lady Gaga position. But then there's the other kind of extreme position, which is that we choose this. That it is it's a chosen action. And I think that the Lady Gaga position is probably more true than the other, but it's very complicated. We don't know why people are gay still. There are a lot of really interesting theories. A lot of it seems to have to do with the utero climate, hormonal in utero climate there's this phenomenon called the birth order effect that was discovered by a sexologist named Ray Blanchard. The idea being that the more brothers and older older brothers a boy has, the more likely he is to be gay.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because the female body becomes more efficient, basically bathing in estrogen. So a lot of it, they're also discovering a myriad of physiological differences between gay men and straight men on average. Difference in finger length, difference in fingerprint, difference in the inner ear. Whatever it is a physical thing. Is deeply ingrained, and it appears that whatever orientation a boy is by the time he hits early teens, that's what he's going to be for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
So male sexuality is pretty rigid. Whatever he is by the time he's early high school, general, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, that's what he's going to be for the rest of his life. Now, as far as I know, that's everything that I just said is still true, but I haven't actually looked at the research since about a decade ago.
Yeah.
It did not, is much more, discovering that you're gay is much more like discovering your eye color or discovering that you're autistic or discovering that you have dyslexia.
Yeah.
And it is discovering that you, say, really like meth or something. It's much more akin to something that naturally arises that you discover about yourself that you did not choose.
Yeah.
And was I born gay? I would say the ingredients for me to eventually become gay were definitely there from the very beginning. For the exact mechanism and the complex interplay between culture, between environment and the body, between environment and biology, I don't know. It's all very complicated, and it might function on a different route for different people, right? There might not be one cause for homosexuality. There might be many causes. Same with a lot of sexual minority. There might not just be one biological route. There might be many routes. Okay,
Yeah.
so all that said, super complicated, but I do think it's largely based in biology, and I'm sure that culture plays a role. I'm sure that trying to decide how deep into the weeds we want to go. Do you want me to stop, or I can keep going? How deep into the weeds do you want me to get here?
I'm wary of time, so maybe it's a
Let's move on.
It's a part two. Let's go from there into. I think you've answered it enough, and I think I agree. I think it's
Okay.
infinitely complex. But then I'm interested in working out what does that look like for a guy who's in your teens and in a very religious Christian family.
The way I will say, I have no time limit.
Okay,
So
cool.
I'm good. I'm good.
That's good to know. We can run a bit
okay.
over then.
So, what does it mean for a guy who's super religious? For me, it meant that the immediate answer was gay therapy, was conversion therapy.
Was that your choice?
I don't know if it was technically my choice, but I don't know if I had any other choice.
Yeah. How old are you at this point?
About 15, 16. I was very young. 17. Especially around 17, yeah.
And when you start to have these feelings that yes, you were gay, did you try to resist that? You're trying to change. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to describe the horror. I mean, it's like discovering that you're a monster. It's like discovering that you are secretly the thing that is damned to hell, that is monstrous, that is inhuman, that is disgusting. I mean, the shame and the disgust, internalized homophobia really destroys people, and it really wrecked
Yeah.
me. It really destroyed me. And yeah, so it did real damage. And I would say coming to terms with my homosexuality was the great battle of the first part of my life. I mean, teens through to about the age of 25 or 26. That was it. That was the struggle of my life. It consumed every minute. And a lot of ways, it's also a waste of time, because what it meant was that I was laid in pursuing all the other things that I could have been doing. I was also, I don't have the best mental health, and I had also survived a shooting when I was 19 years old, and I had,
Oh, really?
yeah, that was when I was a missionary. And so, I had a lot working against me, but
Yeah.
a lot that was slowing me down. But the great tragedies of internalized phobia of any kind, how it takes your life from you. It
Yeah.
steals time. It robs you of decade or 2 decades of your life that you could have spent, enjoying your life, pursuing a career, pursuing relationships, pursuing the things that truly make you happy.
And because you remained in the church through that initial period up to 26, 27. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was
Yeah.
still very much a devout Christian. Now, I will say I don't believe I left Christianity because I was gay. I don't think that I had ultimately come to peace with place as a gay man within Christianity, and I had come to an affirming position and all that.
Yeah. So you thought like a gay man could be within the church.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I eventually came to. This is my very controversial opinion now that gets a lot of progressive Christians mad at me. I now think that that's actually not clearest piece in the Bible. I think that the Bible is, in fact, be contrary to gay sex. The Bible is consistent in two ways. The Bible is consistent in its condemnation of any mention of gay sex. It is negative, even if those mentions of gay sex really have very little to do with what we know as committed gay relationships. And the second thing that the Bible is consistent in is its positive vision of sexuality is always between a man and a woman as the representation of Christ and his church. That is true from the very beginning with Adam and Eve. If Eden is the vision of God's ideal for the world, that vision is heterosexual. Then the logic is it's a very simple step from there to say, well, then homosexuality isn't the ideal. So I'm at the point where I actually think that the affirming arguments for gay marriage from the Bible, the weaker case. I also happen to think that they are the correct argument, but I think that the Bible does not intend to speak to this topic. I think the Bible is simply at best silent, at worst wrong, that we can't actually derive much wisdom about homosexuality from the Bible. And I think that's the more coherent position, that the Bible is against homosexuality and that it's wrong. That's ultimately my position. And that's some progressive Christians who would like to need an affirming position within Scripture. And I'm just at the point where I don't have a stake in the Bible in that way anymore, and I'm happy to just say I just don't think it supports gay sex, and that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I more or less agree with you. And I'll add a little bit more to that. I think so many people make the mistake, Christians as much as anyone, of misunderstanding what the Bible actually is. Like, I mean, it's not meant to be a book about all things. It's not a science book. It's not even a book about morals, really. For me, it's a story of it's a narrative of the redemptive history of Yahweh's dealings with men. And therefore, and most of the passages that deal with sexuality are part one at the time of the law of Moses, which is where he was bringing man out of 400 years of slavery with Egypt, and trying to actually craft a people group that would be very, very different to the people around them, where obviously, homosexuality, but particularly really sort of pagan and sort of a bad version of that was prevalent. And then the second part's the New Testament period, where they were coming out of, where they were surrounded by Greek philosophy at that time, which was really, really similar. So in terms of crafting a people who would be a light to the nations that would live in the way in which Yahweh wanted them to live, it wasn't doing those things. Now, where I think the church makes a massive mistake, and I think homosexuals themselves make the mistake of getting involved in this, is we make it this special sin, and I mean, I don't think you care, but whether you even call it a sin, but it's a way of living. I agree with you. I think it's clear from the beginning. It's the idea of a family unit is man and female, but not all live that way. I mean, look at David. David had 10 wives, and had an affair with a lady, and he wanted to get to her, so he sent the husband off to battle. Like, it's not a book about. If you want to read through it and find the perfect moral example of who followed this, you'll struggle to get one. What I hate so much is that it doesn't. The scriptures don't. It deals with things like lying, or I mean, even look at something like getting tattoos. It's pretty clear that you shouldn't get tattoos.
I have many. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so do I. I've got two. I mean, look at a guy like Jeff I don't know if you follow Jeff Durbin, very sort of conservative Christian. He's argued heavily against, homosexuality. The guy's got tattoos all over his arms. That the point of it is not a moral book where no one can keep the law, no one can be righteous themselves. And yes, there is a way in which we are called to live, and we should. If we follow Christ, we should want to live that way, but it doesn't mean we do. I mean, I've lied in the last week. I've done selfish things in the last week. I don't think I'm condemned for every single act. So, I think I was naturally born probably without kindness to people. So that's sort of more my natural state. But over time, I'm trying to work on that. I'm trying to be more kind. But I hate the way that we've completely outcast anyone with homosexual tendencies from the church and put them as this special group when we're all a bunch of broken people who are healed through the blood of Christ.
Yeah, I also think that the church should transition from seeing homosexuality as a or break your salvation issue to a matter to what the Reformed Church calls a disputable matter. And so in the Reformed tradition, I'm pretty sure it's the Reformed tradition that has this, where they say, look, this is a matter of grave consequence ethically. And it is, right? Real consequences in the real world. But Christians can have sincere disagreements about this topic and still remain in fellowship with each other.
Yeah.
And it is not a matter of salvation. And so someone can, and I really think that is what I was arguing for before I left Christianity, was see homosexuality not as this all or nothing dispute, but rather that this can be a disputable matter. Kind of in the same way Catholics and Protestants, they used to burn each other alive. Now we've kind of gotten to the point where we see, they see each other as, at least, the Vatican has decided that, Vatican II decided that Protestants aren't, beyond God's grace and whatnot. It's like, they can progress to a point where they don't see each other as going to hell. I think that that's where the church should arrive with homosexuality, because, much as I would love to see everyone come to an affirming position. And by affirming, I mean fully embrace relationships as morally equivalent to heterosexual relationships. That's just not going to be the case. That's just not going to happen. And instead, the question is, okay, since that is the reality, how do we live well together? And that's the real question, and that's what I'm concerned about, because I don't really see the Catholic Church changing its position anytime soon. I don't see a lot of these churches changing their position anytime soon. So the question then is, okay, well, how do we live well together? That's what I'm more interested in. And I think that seeing this as a disputable matter with grave ethical consequences, but it is still something that can be put aside that it is not a matter of salvation. That's, I think, a healthy approach to it.
Yeah, I mean, you read the Sermon on the Mount. Like, no one's righteous. The church is full of lusters. The church is full of liars. The church is full of thieves. The church is full of people with, unhealthy sexual desires. Like, that's reality, and none of us can be perfect when we come in. I think, if it's, say, I read your recent article that you wrote about, you're sort of reconsidering thinking about Christianity and thinking of what that looks like. I think anyone can be saved by Christ. I think and Christ is the way to have true fellowship with Yahweh. And then what that looks like moving forward is a relation is what Yahweh wanted all the time, is a personal, intimate relationship with each of us. Whether that means immediately the moment you come into the faith that bang, you renounce everything that you did. I know for a fact that's not true, because I know from my personal circumstances it's taken me 3 years to renounce things, and a lot of things I'm still working on, and I'll continue to work on forever. I think, for you, you're in a long-term relationship. I don't think it's a matter of saying, hey, I need to stop this straight away and then come in and now I've got salvation through Christ again. I agree with you, and we're on the same page. I think you would have to realize that is His will that you continue to be in a homosexual marriage or relationship. No, I can't possibly say that it is, but it's a complex issue, and I think the power of God is to help man through their issues, and what that looks like is between you and Him. So I don't need to come in as judge.
For sure. And, I'm just so much more, I know that a lot of people would listen to what you just said and absolutely, just flames on the side of their face, rage. But it's not the experience that I have with that. And I'm very comfortable with what you just said. In part because I am pretty comfortable to what I think and why, but I also know that we both care about the most important thing, which is the welfare of human beings, and that conscious creatures don't suffer needlessly. I get the sense that that's a pretty important thing to you.
Yeah.
And that we both care about what's true. Because of that common ground, I hear what you're saying, and I'm very okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think as a Christian, we're called to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, love our neighbor as ourselves. Now, like, Corinthians goes into what love is. Love isn't saying, hey, I love you, do whatever you want to. Love is sometimes delivering a hard truth that you don't agree with and being, sometimes hated for that. But I'm sorry, but most Christians aren't being loving when they go about talking to non-believers about how they're living. And we need to do such a better job at that, because it ain't working. I think it's sent a lot of people the other way, really sadly. And I'd love to talk about how that, it seems like because from everything I've read, you had a really tumultuous sort of teens and early 20s, and then
yes,
stuff like the gay conversion therapy, and then you were self-harming and all sorts of stuff, which I'm so sorry to hear. Was the Temple of Satan, was it you rebelling and trying to go the other way and do the opposite?
Good question. I I think it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
You've been demonized your whole life. Only a matter of time before you start to look at the demons and start to feel some sympathy with them.
Yeah.
Before you start to feel some kindred spirit with them, right?
Yeah.
And so it was an act of empowerment where I had been, there's a category of people who are demonized by the church. And it changes through history. It has been Jews, it has been Black people, it has been pagans, it has been homosexuals, it has been at times women, it has been, so on
Can
and
I
so
just
forth.
jump in really quickly
Go
and
for it.
clarify one point? Demonized by the institutional church, which I
That's what
want
I
to
mean.
make sure people understand is
Absolutely.
really separate from what the church actually is. Yeah.
I mean, demonized by the powers that be. And actually, interesting fact is that who invented Satanism? The Catholic Church invented Satanism. Satanism existed, or Satanism was called into existence by the Catholic Church, calling heretics Satanists. So normally, very often, the first usages that we see, there's a fantastic book called Children of Lucifer by Ruben van Lack, and he charts this through history. Their term Satanism was basically invented by the church and was lobbed against heretics. It was a weapon used against people who had the wrong theology.
Yeah.
And
which I
also
think
used
falls.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a full preterist. I believe in fulfilled eschatology. Critics of us will say that we've been possessed by Satan.
Exactly.
And that
That's right.
Agents of Satan. Which is ridiculous because, I mean, I think you know this. Like, Satan is from the Hebrew word hasatan, that means adversary. One of the first, I think it's in Numbers or Chronicles, that the adversary is God.
Right.
And
that's right.
I think the Satan in the New Testament period was the high priest. The adversary to the early church was the Ananias and the high priesthood, who were cast into Gehenna, translated as hell. The idea of Satan as the supernatural enemy of God, I just spiritual being that possesses people. I just don't see that.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Totally.
Yeah.
So, it's also interesting to note that Book of Job, Hasatan, was a member of God's court. And, he was part of the heavenly court. He was in heaven in God's court. Then God engages in this gamble with him, in this game with him for the life of Job. Okay, so, but all that aside, so there were a lot of things going on with why I became a Satanist. One is that I had been demonized my entire life. And I looked at the symbol of Satan not as a hero, or not as the ultimate villain or the literal incarnation of evil, but as the downtrodden will. Proud will who stands up against arbitrary authority, the unbowed will who is the voice of the outsider and the misunderstood. And I saw that, especially in literature. This is a tradition in literature, kind of started with Paradise Lost, John Milton, and then continues from there with some extraordinary books and poems like Bolt of the Angels by Anatole France, of this valorization of Satan. And it's really rooted less in the biblical Satan than it is in the literary Satan of Paradise Lost, right? Okay, so...
Which the funny thing is, most of the church don't believe in the biblical version. They believe in the secular...
Believe in that version, yes.
Yeah.
They believe in the literary version.
Yeah.
And there's always this interplay between pop culture and the church. There's constantly this interplay between popular literature and imagination and the church. And so much of what the church thinks about hell came from Dante's Inferno. So much of what church thinks about Satan came from Milton, so on and so forth. Okay, so really resonated with that. But also, I say this. I never had to fight or struggle to see the inversion of Satan and to see Satan as a hero is beautiful, despite all the cultural pressure to do otherwise. That's a very weird kind of brain to be able to look at Satan and say, I like that guy unironically. Just totally unironically be like, I like that character. There's something really cool there. Guess what? Being able to do that locks a door into a whole room of weird-ass people who think just like you.
Yeah.
Okay? For whom the world comes inverted, who think in weird ways, who are outsiders, who are outcasts, who don't quite fit. And that is the entire Satanic Temple. People who self-select to be Satanists going to be extremely weird.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think in a lot of ways, religions are neurotypes. And what they do is they kind of unlock a door into a room where you can hang out with other people of a similar neurotype to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Satanism did. And it made me feel very seen. It was my home. I felt wanted. Most of all, why did I join the Satan? Oh, here's another important thing. They're non-theistic. They don't believe in a literal Satan. They don't believe in a literal God, right? And so what it was what I was looking for, a marriage of skepticism, agnosticism with religion and ritual and community.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. That's what I needed. Also, ultimately, Satanists made me feel wanted. And I'm a simple creature. I'm a human being. And human beings go where they feel wanted. And I ultimately felt wanted by the temple. So that's where I was for 6 years.
And then you left recently. I'd love to know, I think, Stephen, I might sort of wrap the conversation up shortly, but I think I'd love to get you on again to explore some other topics. And maybe even I've got a couple of other guests that maybe we could do almost like a round table. Because
I'd be happy to.
I could speak for another couple of hours here, but I try to keep each episode to a similar length. I'd love just you to let us know, like, you had this crazy experience in the church. You ended up leaving the church because you didn't believe. Spent 6 years in the Temple of Satan, and you've left that. Where are you at now? Have you found peace?
Oh,
No.
the most peace that I find is in meditation.
Yeah.
Most peace that I find is in non-dual awareness and daily practice.
Yeah.
That's where I find peace. But, losing a religious community is extremely stressing. It is extremely painful. And the only thing I know to do is to just let that suck. Just let it suck that I've lost many religious communities now.
Yeah.
And it is extremely painful. It's like a death. And the appropriate response to a death is to just accept it. And so that's where I am, is I'm just accepting that it is incredibly painful. It's incredibly difficult. Also accepting that wanderlust might never be satisfied. And is that actually a bad thing? Because what makes humanity amazing is that we never stop being curious and we never stop looking for more.
Yeah.
It has its downsides, of course, but it's also what makes our species so beautiful, and it leads to invention, and it leads to creativity, and it leads to poetry. I mean, that restlessness is, I don't actually know if I see the restlessness itself as bad anymore. I've come to accept it, or at least I think I am coming to accept it. And maybe I will settle on a particular religious tradition, but right now I'm very actively resisting that, like I said at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
Part of that does mean accepting that I am restless. There is a spiritual wanderlust, and it might not be satisfied.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I've always been a skeptic, and I've always loved asking questions. And I mean, my friends nickname me the phase man because I sort of go all in on one thing and then onto the next. And I always had that restlessness that you had. And then there's a scripture that you probably know. It's like the merchant who found the pearl of a great price and he sold everything and bought that pearl. And that was what it was like for me 3 years ago, where I found this truth that I'd always been looking for, even though I wasn't looking for it. And the restlessness is gone, but I still love, I mean, actually now just digging into the Bible and seeing it for what it is and allowing myself to be called a heretic and distancing myself from the institutional church has actually been wonderful. But that previous yearning that I had, the next truth has gone. It's been, I don't know, it's really interesting.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Can you envisage a time where the sacred tension and the wanderer in you ever rests on something? Or do you think it's always in you to have a new question?
Don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting because it did find rest for about 6 years in the Satanic Temple.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. Best that I know to do is to honor and respect yearning and where I am now, and to just embrace it. It's like I'm a runner. I'm a long distance runner. And it's like, I don't know if you're a runner or if you work out or you hike or something.
I've got 3 kids under 4 now, so my running days are finished. But I used to love running.
Great.
10K
So
3 times a week. So I know long distance.
Perfect.
Running.
Okay. Yeah. So long distance runner, it's like, you're in the middle of it. And really the only thing you can do is just lean in to it.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. It's that leaning in and it's the peace that you want. What you want to be feeling. No. But the act of leaning into it, there is a sort of contentment. There is a sort of pleasure. There is a satisfaction that comes from it. Because here's the thing is that no matter how much I may burn for something else, it is always this very moment that I return to.
Yeah.
Always coming back to right now.
Yeah.
So eventually I have to be okay with right now, regardless of what it is, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether I'm dissatisfied or not, regardless of whether I am grieving or not, regardless. This present moment is inescapable. So what you can do is just like, when you're on that marathon and you're halfway through and you are fucking hurting, just lean into the moment because that moment is all there is. That's kind of how I see it. Whether I will find myself in another religious tradition or not, who knows? Genuinely don't know. I've been considering returning to some form of Christianity, but I'm not sure if that would be possible. I've written quite a bit about that. I don't know if that would be possible.
Yeah.
Probably most likely would be something like Zen Buddhism. We'll see.
Perfect. Well, here's to the journey, Stephen. Thanks for being so open and coming on. I've really loved chatting with you, and I've learned a lot. You've forced me to consider some of my opinions and study them harder. I think through the process, you've helped me be more loving. There's been time in my life where I wouldn't have even spoken to someone like you. So, and here we are having a great chat, and I hope we can chat again. So,
sure, same.
It's been great. Thanks for your time, and we'll speak again soon.
This has been great. Anytime.
Awesome, mate.
All right.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like and subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live.